are so excited to have Eric. Yes,
Woo!
Eric.
Dance moves.
Eric
Dance
Pfeiffer.
moves.
Oh, yeah. We're here with Eric Pfeiffer from the founder and CEO of MPWR Coaching, which is this really interesting thing. They've got something called a leadership operating system, which I'm sure Eric is going to let us know all about for teams and leaders and organizations, which is fun. Yeah. And he was a guest on a podcast of a friend of ours, and he was recommended by Luis Hernandez, and he said, "Hey, Bruce, you need to get to know Eric because he is an awesome guy."
I think he's right. Welcome.
We are thrilled to have Eric Pfeiffer here today. Hi, Eric.
Hi, you guys. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Well, so our viewers know who you are. Why don't you give us the skinny on what you do and where you come from?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm a native Southern California boy who has also lived across the country, all the way to the East Coast and back. So I am familiar with a variety of the different cultures within the U.S. I have been on a long journey, I like to tell people, of first and foremost trying to be a better leader myself. And from the overflow of that journey, I have, started years ago sharing with others what I was learning, and that turned into a coaching business. And so that's what I've been doing now for, almost 20 years, if I remember correctly.
So you were about 5 when it started. We get that. That's great.
Yeah. Not quite, but yes, I was younger.
So tell us what MPWR Coaching is focused on.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different coaching businesses out there who focus on a variety of different aspects of people and business. And our particular focus is on helping leaders operate more effectively under increasing pressure. We're all the best version of ourselves when things are going our way, but when our backs are up against a fence is usually when we find ourselves adopting attitudes and behaviors that are unhelpful both to ourselves and the people and environment around us. That was a part of my own story, was realizing that the higher you go in leadership, there's more pressure, not less. And under pressure, I often found myself cracking and operating in ways that were unhelpful. And so that's what we primarily work with leaders and teams and organizations. We tell people are the engine of your business, no matter what you sell or what service you provide. And so if the engine of your business, in other words, the individuals and the group of people that are leading the business, if they're working well together, the business thrives and in all ways possible. And if the people are not operating effectively, individually or collectively, the business normally plateaus and even stalls. So our passion is working with leaders and teams to help them make sure that the engine of their business is operating optimally for the best return.
Oh, love it. Yay.
Yay. People first. We love organizations.
Yeah, anyone who talks about people first is just like such an exceptional human in our book. So yay you. I'm so glad that you're focused on that. It is true. It
Thank
makes
you.
Crazy when people, when you ask people like, what business are you in? And they say, rocket fuel. And you say, you're in the business of people. It's a people business.
Yeah,
so aside from, and I really like how you help leaders think about being better leaders under pressure, because the truth is that's where I think the real change needs to happen. How do you show up in those times? So aside from knowing that leaders need that skill, kind of how to handle that pressure, turning themselves into a diamond. I was thinking about the cave or the pressure of a rock to become a diamond, just like that.
Yeah, like that.
Just like that.
Just like that. That's how it's made.
Just like that.
Yes, just like that. Just like that. What would you say is missing in, really, really missing in leaders today, aside from maybe knowing how to better handle themselves under pressure? What qualities do you think are missing in leaders today?
Yeah, well, I would say number one, I think the discipline and skills of self-awareness are sorely missing, and primarily because those are not skills that are taught at almost any point in the education system, whether it's through elementary, middle school, high school, grad school even. I talk to so many people who've got MBAs and never once took a class on self-leadership. I think we all understand that we can only lead others to the degree that we are able to lead ourselves. So I think self-awareness is a really big deal, which then leads to self-leadership. I think the other significant gap in leadership nowadays is we're missing an attention and an intentional investment into the development of the next generation. I think so often we get preoccupied with our own role, our own responsibility, our own tasks. We want to be successful for our sake, which I think is fantastic. I think we do need to fight for our own success. But part of our journey of becoming more successful should translate into helping other people on their journey of becoming more successful. I think if we are giving a little bit more time and attention to empowering the people around us, it actually causes us to thrive even more. So the more that I can turn leaders' attention toward empowering their teams, their organization, I find that they actually feel more fulfilled, more significant, and operate with greater purpose.
I don't know. Did you see what he did there?
Well, I did.
Power.
Power. It's
You
delicious.
did.
Unintended.
Power. Yes, that's
Power.
good
That's
though.
great.
It's such a great word. I love that word.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what surprises you when you go to work with your new clients when they come in the door. What are some of the surprising things that come your way when you're sitting down to coach or begin working with teams?
I guess, are you asking like what surprises me most, like what catches me off guard maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
I think a few things I can put my finger on almost immediately. Number one, at how reluctant leaders are to allow their own struggles to be exposed, right? And so I think there's an immense pressure on leaders to have it all figured out, to have the answers, to know how to solve all the problems in front of them, which is a huge fallacy.
Yeah.
None of us should know all the answers or how to solve all the problems. So I think a lot of leaders, I'm often surprised by how reluctant they are to admit their struggles, where they're frustrated, where they feel like their inadequacy comes to play. I think the other thing that continues to shock me, even though it shouldn't because I've seen it a million times, is how often leaders want us to come in and fix their team or their organization and assume that they're doing just fine. So the blind spots are sometimes shocking. And I think the third thing is how little confidence that leaders often display in their ability to actually train other leaders and empower other leaders. In terms of business acumen, in terms of finances, spreadsheets, in terms of, maybe big strategic business decisions, they might feel confident. But when it comes to the actual development, training, and empowerment of their team or the leaders around them, I'm often shocked by how little confidence they have that they can actually do that, which is why I think so many organizations try to outsource leadership development rather than owning the responsibility of how can we actually get better at this.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, that last concept of not feeling confident enough to be able to, I guess, pass down traits or train on those traits. I think that's huge. And I think a lot of that stems back to kind of what you said earlier with regards to the way that we've learned how to be leaders over the last couple of decades really was by watching someone else and then trying to replicate that behavior as opposed to tapping into what our own resources are, refining that, and showing up authentically and empathically for other people as that leader. And I think in my mind, that's the direction that we need to go. And it sounds very much like that's some of the work that you're doing, which is probably why we feel really great synergy.
Kinship,
yes, exactly.
That's right.
Do you have a question?
Well, I just was going to comment. I loved your second point about, the fact that leaders call you in, like, hey, we've got huge problems, and they refuse to even admit that they have a role to play in the dysfunction of their organization. I'm
That's right.
fine. What we find in the world of kind of power skills or soft skills is everybody thinks they listen great, they think they communicate, that they're fantastic at it, that they don't need any help with their emotional intelligence, that they've just got that all wrapped up. And yet they can see it in everybody else and how terrible everybody else is.
Right.
And
Right.
they refuse to practice. It's not the nature of these soft skills to kind of find a way to put something in practice every day. It's challenging.
So I have a question.
Yeah, and that's what, please.
So here's my question. I think what we're both sharing is what we're seeing in the work that we each do, kind of a turn and a push toward more. We've heard lots of phrases: conscious leadership, vulnerable leadership, heart-led leadership. Those kinds of terms are kind of floating out there, if you will. How do you get the message across to leaders that this is where they need to go, that they do need to look at themselves and see themselves and be vulnerable and share, that they don't know it all, that they don't have all the answers? How do you do that in Empower? Like, you don't have to give away all your secret sauce. We definitely don't want to do that. What would you say, though, is maybe kind of the first step in helping leaders kind of peel back the onion?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think there are a variety of pathways that we have found can be helpful. The one pathway is a leader is experiencing so much pain in terms of the dysfunction of their team, their organization, their relationship to their board, that the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. I'm just quoting from somebody smarter than me. And so when the pain point becomes too high, sometimes leaders are willing to embark on that journey of self-discovery. Other times we lead them often through different exercises that help them begin to assess all of the symptomatic experiences, like kind of like a physician. You go to a doctor and they say, "Hey, what's going on? What are you experiencing?" And inevitably you've gone to the doctor because something hurts. There's some, ailment that you're experiencing. You're going to point at the symptoms. So we give leaders an opportunity in a safe environment to point at the symptoms that they're experiencing that are frustrating them, that are causing them some kind of disruption. And then what we do is we help them begin to understand that those symptoms are always tied to systemic issues going on within the culture. And once they begin to see, it's kind of like if you go to a doctor and you say, "Here are my symptoms." If the doctor says, "Gosh, I have no idea what's going on with you. I'm so sorry." That's not very encouraging. But you go to a doctor because you trust that the doctor understands that those symptoms are connected to something that's not maybe working right in your biology. And in the same way as a coaching practice, we help leaders connect the symptoms, the pain they're experiencing, to the systemic dynamics going on in their culture. Once they start to see that connection, I think hope begins to rise up in them that, hey, you know what? If we could deal with these systemic issues, we could alleviate and take care of those symptoms rather than just taking Advil or ibuprofen that just takes the pain away for a moment. Like, can we actually change the systemic nature of our environment that would lead to a painless or less painful future? That's a part of it. And then the third pathway, I think, is that sometimes leaders are reluctant to admit their own part in the dysfunction or what's not working in their team or organization. And, that's fine at first. But over time, what we do is we help leaders understand that leaders define culture. In the same way that parents define the culture of their household. We get mad at teenagers because they disrupt the culture of our household. But I have to remind parents, like, you're the one who's in charge of the culture of your household. If you give that authority away to your teenagers, if you give that authority away to your young children, then you're no longer leading, you're being led. And that's what puts people into a victim mindset. So in the same way, over time, as a leader begins to recognize, actually, you know what, for better and for worse, I have a significant part to play in the dynamics of what's going on in this organization. And because our process, we don't club leaders over the head and tell them how bad we are. We actually create environments where they get to discover for themselves those connecting points. And what happens is over time, as they begin to recognize, gosh, you know what? I'm operating with unhelpful attitudes and behaviors. I can see where I'm contributing to some of the problems that we're experiencing. I think it gives them a little bit more freedom to recognize and take ownership, because you're not going in and saying, hey, you're a bad leader, you're ruining your culture, you should change X, Y, or Z. We're going in and saying, hey, let's together utilize, as you referred to earlier, let's utilize this leadership operating system that we've developed that's going to empower you to see what's going on, to assess it or diagnose it more accurately. And then at that point, you get to choose whether you take responsibility and become a part of the change. But what I have found is, by creating that opportunity for leaders, they're much more likely to take ownership than if you just try to shove it down their throat from the beginning.
Yeah, I do find that maybe a club to the head can help in some circumstances that you referenced, but yeah, not all the time.
Yes, I know a few people that I'd like to line up.
Yes.
Wait, what? That sounds terrible.
What are we talking about?
Just teasing.
Yes.
Just teasing.
Yes, indeed. I had a very important question. I'm curious to know how you see leadership changing, as we're evolving from the baby boomer retirement, right? Our Gen Xers have come up into the world. Now we're I'll speak for the two of us.
Don't you tell everyone how old I am.
Well, you're right. Gail's a Gen Xer. I'm a millennial. It's very awkward.
Yeah, sure. I robbed the cradle.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know.
So, and now with Gen Z coming in, and the expectations of Gen Z of their leaders, and Y and Z, yes, that's right. What do you see your leadership sect kind of doing, and how they're approaching those different cohorts?
Ooh, I love that question.
That's a great question, because there's so many layers to that question. I'll just tackle a couple. First of all, the tension between different generational groups within the workplace is not a new phenomenon, but there's clearly a significant transition happening right now. And so a lot of what we're doing is helping those different generations communicate more effectively. And that's part of this leadership operating system. We provide teams with shared tools that have shared language, shared practices that help that kind of cross-generational communication get on the same page. I also have to remind the older leaders that there was a time when you too were young and people were suspicious of you and thought you were entitled and bratty and thought you knew everything. And, so the same indictment that we're making of the younger generation is the indictment that was made of us when we were young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and idealistic and had a vision for something different. But then here's what I spend a lot of time doing is helping the generational groups understand and appreciate each other and see where they can each benefit from one another. So the older generation obviously comes with loads of more of experience, of wisdom, of what's tried and true, what has worked. They've paid their own dues in a sense to get where they are. And I think the younger generation can too quickly discount that experience, that wisdom, maybe because they're not using the same language as the younger generation, maybe because, the younger generation is suspicious of the authority structures. But also I have to remind the older leaders that these young folks are actually, I think, ushering in a counterbalance. I think every new generation counterbalances what's gone before them. The younger generation has recognized a few things. Number one, giving your life in the sense of attaching your identity, your sense of significance and purpose to work is ultimately not very fulfilling. If that's the sole source of your identity and purpose, that work cannot be your only relational group. And also they're not buying into that they're just a cog in a machine and that they serve a purpose in the business that really isn't seeking the best interest of those younger people. And so helping the older leaders understand these young people, they want to feel like, number one, that you care about them beyond just the job they do, which I think is fair. considering how much time we spend in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they want to know that we have their future in mind, that we want to see them develop. So in the same way that I say parents, parents in our best moments, we want our ceiling to be our kids' floor. We want to see them go further than us, do greater things than us, achieve more than us in our best moments. That's the parenting DNA. And I think in the same way, when leaders are able to see that we have a finite time here on earth and in any career, but that our greatest sense of fulfillment and purpose is to invest into the next generation, to equip them to take things further, to achieve greater things than we were able to achieve, I think begins to scratch the itch that younger generation is looking for. So again, just to go back, make it simple, helping them understand, appreciate one another, and begin to operate in a way where they can both benefit from the other.
Oh,
That's
I love
great.
that.
Thank you.
That's fabulous. And in fact, it sounds really simple, just getting people to kind of understand it. And yet it takes effort. And I'm so glad that that's some of the work that you're doing, because it's really critical and necessary. And I very much feel like with our kids at 24 and 21, like I have to remind myself sometimes, just really open myself up to what they're bringing to me, because they are so brilliant and bright and curious. And not jaded. And so there's just so much joy to be found there. And honestly, speaking of joy, and, happiness, what is making you happy right now? What is inspiring you in your life, or what are you looking forward to?
Ooh, that's a wonderful question. I think I'll share a couple of things. Number one, I think like you folks, I have adult children. My daughter's 21. My son is 19. They're both in their collegiate years. They're both in that significant transition between, dependence and interdependence. They're just on an incredible journey. And I think both for my wife and I, learning how to lead them well, to invest in them well, to support them, to challenge them well. And we're learning real time. There are no instruction manuals for some of this stuff. But what I can tell you, which I love, is the tools that I invest into leaders are the very same tools that we use in our parenting strategies, because parenting is leadership, leadership is parenting. They're so synonymous.
Yep.
So that's been very life-giving. And also my wife and I, and I think we mentioned this in our last conversation, my wife and I are in that kind of midlife. Our kids are transitioning out of the house. My wife and I are both, for the first time, pursuing slightly separate careers because we worked together for so many years. There's a lot of change. And there's not a lot of instruction manuals on how to go through midlife and the crises that inevitably come. And so I think, we've spent the last number of months in some intensive counseling, marriage counseling, which for some people I think just sounds so scary. But for me, I look at it as an opportunity to discover a new season of life, a new version of myself, a new version of our marriage. I tell people, yes, it is difficult. It can be very painful. As a coach, I can't say that I'm always the best at working on myself all the time. But when there are life circumstances that force me in some ways to really do my own hard work, what I find is, though it can be painful on the front end, is always so incredibly life-giving, leads to great breakthroughs, transformative experiences, and always feels like it gives me a new lease on life, if that makes sense.
I love it.
I love the fact that you say your parenting strategies are the same as the leadership strategies and vice versa. We were fortunate enough to learn the improv yes and mantra very early in our parenting career, and I will tell you, now that it is a pinnacle part of our business career, those go hand in hand. It's just saying yes and keeping conversations going with your teenagers and your 20-somethings.
Young adults.
Yes, young adults. Oh boy. All right, our last question for you, Eric, is what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given in your life? It can relate to your personal life. It can relate to your business life. It can relate to your academic life. It doesn't matter. What's that nugget you keep coming back to? You're like, ooh, Yeah, no, this was a great piece of advice.
Oh gosh. There are a number of great pieces of advice I've received. I'll pick one for our session today.
Okay.
Was in my mid 20s. I was going through a major transition of life, family, mentally, emotionally, in a lot of different ways. Was just kind of like in a crisis of life season, post college and all that stuff. And I was in a time where I was just unhappy and feeling a little bit disoriented and not quite sure about what I was supposed to be doing with my life, which is ironic because I've gone through that probably 15 times since my early 20s. I tell people in their 20s, I said, you're going through this now, but I promise you'll go through it over and over and over again because life changes, seasons come and go. And I remember a mentor at that time saying to me, Eric, you got to be careful because so often the things that you feel like are making you unhappy are actually the things that you really have no control over. So if you're dependent on finding a sense of happiness, significance, purpose, value, inspiration from the things in your life that you can't control, then you'll probably stay there for most of your life. But when you wake up and realize that where your happiness, sense of significance, fulfillment, purpose, where those things can be found is actually in the areas of your life that you can control, it transforms everything. And that was a significant turning point in my life where I realized, you know what? Like I have a lot more authority and power over my life than I realized. I was giving so much of that away to circumstance and to painful relationships and, you know, my parents' divorce and all kinds of stuff. But when you wake up and realize, my gosh, actually, I'm in charge of my attitudes and behaviors. I get to choose the mood that I go into every day with. I get to choose how I respond to difficulties. Like I'm in control of my life. I'm in the driver's seat of my life. I didn't realize how often I had jumped into the back seat and was blaming the world around me for where my life was going. And that piece of advice woke me up and has become kind of a fundamental kind of reference point for myself that when life feels crazy, out of control, frustrating, scary, I always go back to, you know what? My sense of security, strength, and confidence will come from practicing 100% personal responsibility in every area of my life, rather than, again, blaming the world or waiting for the world to fix my life.
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic.
I love that.
Yes, that's great.
Seriously love that. And
yeah. Oh, we doing a round of applause? Okay.
Round of applause.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
We are so thankful to have had you and had this time with you, and just feel like I know you so much more, even though we felt immediate connection when we first met you. I feel like we have an even deeper one now, and I'm looking forward to developing our relationship and friendship as we move forward.
Yeah, I'm going to remember to be in the driver's seat of my own life.
I got to stop jumping in the back seat.
I think I'm in the trunk, actually, or the trailer behind it. So that's
cool. Yeah.
So thank you, Eric. We thoroughly enjoyed our time with you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your time. Take care.